Our gospel lesson for today comes from the 13th chapter of Mark, verses 24 to 37. They're the coming of the Son of Man, the lesson of the fig tree, and the necessity of watchfulness. But in those days after that suffering, the sun will darken, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from the heavens, and the power in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branches become tender and put forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It's like a man going on a journey. When he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore, keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or at dawn, or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. The wisdom of the Lord.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to start today with a quote from a spiritual writer, Cynthia Bourgeau, who says, "Hope's home is at the innermost point in us and in all things. It is a quality of aliveness. It does not come at the end as a feeling that results from a happy outcome. Rather, it lies at the beginning as a pulse of truth that sends us forth. When our innermost being is attuned to this pulse, it will send us forth in hope, regardless of the physical circumstances of our lives. Hope fills us with the strength to stay present, to abide in the flow of mercy, no matter what outer storms assail us." It's been a difficult year, hasn't it? That's just to put it mildly. The biggest trial, of course, has been the pandemic. The education system is undergoing unprecedented ordeal. Kids are online learning, not seeing their friends as much. Parents are having to be both parent and teachers are having to be both teacher and parent. And somehow, you still have to clean the house. The economy is crushed. People are losing their jobs. Small businesses are closing, and people are feeling anxious about just getting by. COVID kills people, many people. I don't know the number. I know it's over 260,000 at this point, and every one of those is linked to somebody who is grieving. It can hang on for some people, called the long haulers, and cause many pains and ills. Recently, I read that COVID makes one more susceptible to mental illness. The whole situation is making us more susceptible to mental illness. People are quarantined, which increases isolation in a culture that is already disconnected. The ramifications could be dire and long-lasting. The disease has uncovered the frailty of our economy. Who knew a little virus, could make so much havoc? It's brought insecurity about the future, about our personal future, the future of our nation, and the world. And then, of course, for the past more than 1 year, we've been dealing with another virus in Donald Trump, the virus of immoral ineptitude and greed. I'm putting it mild again. He's attacked our system of governance, exposing its frailty, making us more insecure. It will take a long time to overcome all he has done. 73 million people voted for Trump. I still can't understand it. It seems to me it might be a sign of the end times. The division we face is titanic. The feelings of anger are entrenched. It feels like these are all signs of the apocalypse. In 1844, Baptist preacher William Miller, interpreting parts of Daniel 8 and Revelation 14, mathematically figured out that Jesus would come again and launch the apocalypse on October 22nd of that year, 1844. His followers sold all their possessions and then climbed on the top of their roofs and waited. Historically, this is referred to as the Great Disappointment. I confess that I have kind of ridiculed this event, but now I have a little bit of an understanding of what they might have been going through to get to that point. Don't we just get so tired we want it all to end? Apocalyptic literature developed within Judaism in the post-exilic period, that would be between the exile and the coming of Jesus. In the 2nd century BCE, there was a revolt in Israel, the Maccabean revolt. The Maccabees family succeeded in driving out the Seleucid Greeks out of Palestine. They held Israel for about 100 years, but it slowly declined for decades before that. The result of this event was a further understanding that Israel was not going to be the big boy in the neighborhood. They would always more than likely be ruled by someone else after the Seleucid Greeks, who came, but the Romans. At the exile, the time of the exile, 2nd Isaiah said to the people of Israel, "You will be a light to the nations." By the end of the Maccabean period, it still seemed that none of those nations saw that light. So if one's hope is not to become an empire, and if hope is not to be able to rule one's self, and if hope is not in being a light to the nation, where does hope come from? Embedded in Mark's gospel, this 13th chapter is called the Little Apocalypse. The Little Apocalypse. Mark wrote his gospel in an environment of anxiety and fear. A huge apocalypse happened in 70 AD with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. The temple that the Maccabees had restored. The temple, which was the center of their identity and their security from as far back as anyone knew. It's hard to imagine the shock and the anxiety. Mark, therefore, uses apocalyptic to bring some kind of comfort to his community, which was in distress. I've always viewed apocalyptic as more of a threat than a comfort. A lot of times I want to skip this first Sunday of Advent because I know this is what's coming. The kind of evil that we have witnessed this past year, the suffering and the despair, have been overwhelming. First, the things we all share in the pandemic and political chaos, and then we have our own grief and pain. I do understand the impulse to sell everything and wait for the end. I would be very happy to sell everything, but that didn't happen in 1844, and it's not going to happen now. I believe the apocalypse is not something that happens once in history, but it's happening all the time. Many of us must remember the movie Apocalypse Now, right? You recognize the music was in the movie? Just wanted to make sure you understood that. Set in the Vietnam War, a colonel named Walter Kurtz is in an outpost way up the Mekong River. He goes rogue, becomes a demigod to the indigenous people there. The army considers him insane and a threat. So they send a Captain Willard to go and take him out. When they get to the encampment, they find a horrid scene, bodies, severed heads strewn all over the place. Willard is captured. Then he's allowed to roam the camp while Kurtz lectures him on history and civilization. It's a long movie, long making it short. Willard is able to attack Kurtz and kill him, and his dying words are horror, the horror. Apocalypse Now is based on Joseph Conrad's dystopian novel, The Heart of Darkness, set in late 19th century Congo. One of our greater apocalypses in modern times was initiated by King Leopold II of Belgium, who perpetrated any terror, cruelty, or torture in order to extract wealth out of the Congo, primarily through ivory and rubber. Leopold felt that Belgium was a little sibling of all the European colonists. He wanted to be the big boy too, and it cost millions of lives in the Congo. Estimates range from 2 million all the way up to 20 million. There's a Netflix show, I think it's on Netflix, called King Leopold's Ghost. These stories have become iconic illustrations of the horror of humanity. In many ways, we have not had to face apocalypse like many, relatively. We've had economic growth and economic security, modern medicine, vaccines, sanitation, and we've been relatively safe, fearful of tsunamis and earthquakes at least. This virus has surprised us. There are apocalyptic events happening now in the world: Syrian refugee crisis, the expulsion of the Rohingya people in Myanmar, and the civil war in Yemen. Did anybody see the movie about Chernobyl? I don't remember what networks that's on, but that really caught me. People were dying of radiation exposure, turning translucent blue. Soldiers were sent out to kill every single living being in the zone, even puppies. The creation of a swath of land is now uninhabitable for millennium. Earthquakes and tsunamis can be apocalyptic events. The event in Fukushima, Japan in 2011 has caused by nature and also by human activity and irresponsibility. Now some natural disasters are traced to human causes as well. Climate change looms as the greatest threat of an apocalypse to come. We've had this arbitrary pandemic and a virus come to us, and we've, from the inside, been assailed by an individual who I would call the heart of darkness. We have been experiencing a little apocalypse, haven't we? Remembering that the Gospel of Mark was written to people who were fearful and lacking security and very, very anxious, possibly depressed. If for Mark, the little apocalypse was meant to bring hope. For Mark, the resurrection of Jesus was a cosmic event, changing reality itself and bringing into reality, incarnating into reality, a field of force in Jesus Christ, the power of love present in every event, every occasion, even in the midst of apocalypse now. I believe that Mark's ways to experience this hope can be in two ways. The first is the belief that no matter how painful and horrific things are, God is with us in the end. The other day, Aaron saw me feeling very sad, and he came and gave me a hug and said, "Don't worry, Dad, we'll see him again." Don't worry, people. I believe we will see him again in the end. In the end, God will judge and God wins. The second way to experience hope is in the present, to see, to feel goodness, to love, to see the beauty in our midst. A few weeks ago, I asked for examples of hope from all of you. Thank you for those who responded. Most of the responses were about these small incidences in each day, something seen in nature, a sunset, a beautiful fall leaves, flowers in the garden, or a connection to a person. Lisa Breaker shared about a contact she made while picking up yard signs for the school when a father of a student burst out of the house and shook her hands until they realized they shouldn't be doing that. But there was the contact. That contact brought hope. Diane Carlisle offered a quote from L.R. Nost. "Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break. All things can be mended. Not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you." Somebody mentioned a hummingbird. Hope in a hummingbird. Hope in the connection we experience with people, even in a pandemic. Hope in the rays of sun and the shining moon that has not faded. Hope in children. Hope in the loving service of people. Finally, I want to share a poem that Donna Schultz shared with me in this, asking for things about hope. After the fire, greening. After death, rising. God of mercy, give me faith. After the insult, the beauty. Despite the wound, wholeness. God of healing, give me grace. Within the sorrow, the joy. Within the trouble, the way. God of light, give me peace. Beneath the noise, the silence. Beneath the earth, the seed. God of truth, give me hope. Amidst the prisoners, the presence. Amidst the cruel, the witness. God of justice, give me courage. Beyond despair, the wisdom. Beyond defeat, the power. God of love, give me love. We are living in a little apocalypse, and there is hope. Amen.